Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be talking about The One Thing, Chapter 16 of The One Thing, the three commitments, all a part of the section, part 3 of the book, which is detailing the extraordinary results of living your life by one thing. If you guys remember last time, we talked about chapter 15, which was about time blocking. We talked a lot about time blocking, and it was all about productivity and living for productivity. So if you guys remember, what was the first one? And we're going just up the we were going up the iceberg. It was your purpose, finding your purpose, living by priority, living for productivity, living with purpose. I think that was it, living with purpose. And like I said, specifically last time we talked about time blocking and keeping a schedule or blocking time off to work on your one thing. And we saw some very actionable things that I took and I applied right away after going back and rereading this chapter to some interesting success. They talked about Gary talks about building a bunker where you have a specific committed place where you work on your one thing. And you don't let any distractions in your bunker. Your bunker is there to protect you from things that'll invade and try to distract you from your one thing. You have everything you need in your bunker. You don't have to venture very far. So it's really meant to keep your mind on a certain task for a while. And Gary actually says to block off 4 hours a day for that. And there's actually a specific reason for it that he details in the chapter we'll go over today, the three commitments. And I immediately put this to use where I now at work have my phone off, stored in the other room. I was normally doing a Pomodoro technique for like 20, 25 minutes and then breaks. Now I've been trying to go 1 hour. 1 hour on a certain task away from my phone. I keep now 2 water bottles near me within arm's reach, because before I was getting up to refill my water every time I drink it, and sometimes I drink my water pretty fast. I got to stay hydrated. So I'll go over, I'll fill up my water, and then, my phone's right there. Then I'll check my phone. Next thing you know, I'm distracted, and I got to come back, and I got to figure out what the heck I was doing, because I end up being gone for so long that I have to reorient myself to the task at hand. So you see where you get in trouble with this. So I thought that was a very good chapter, the last chapter we did, chapter 15, and immediately I've been putting it to good use. Today we're going to talk about the three commitments. I'm just going to go to the first slide. So what are the three commitments? Well, there are these three. You follow the path of mastery. You move from E to P. What does that mean? Entrepreneurial to purposeful. We're going to talk about that. And you live the accountability cycle. And these are the three commitments that you make to yourself on your journey through to the one thing. And the first one we'll talk about here is mastery. And the thing about mastery is that highly successful people see mastery as a path rather than a destination. And it's this shift in mindset that I think brings you closer to mastering a certain skill set or obtaining your one thing, because the journey never ends, and it never stops. Never stops. You think, if you take like a sports example, you think Tiger Woods ever stops practicing? He's the greatest golfer of all time, in my opinion. Some people still say Jack Nicklaus. He's got more majors. I'm not going to argue with you. But you think Tiger stops going to the driving range or on the chipping green, on the putting green. Even though he's the best golfer out there right now, no, he doesn't, because it's not done. Even after you win that first green jacket, it's not done. It's never done. But how many times have you seen guys win one major championship and then they don't win another one? There's lots of people like that. Well, was that first championship the destination, or is it just part and parcel of you on the path towards something greater? That's just like a stepping stone. So that's the mindset you have to have. You're constantly learning and relearning things en route to mastery. And you never actually even get to mastery. Because even once you get to a destination, there's always another destination. There's always another hurdle. If you want it to be. Now, you can make that your final destination, but are you going to get anywhere after that? Or do you just coast? Do you get on this okay plateau, which is something Gary brings up later in this chapter, where you're just fine with being where you're at? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's up to you. Nobody's going to make you go beyond your okay plateau. But here's the thing is, if you're disappointed in your results, maybe you should rethink your efforts and reanalyze what you need to be doing and the actions you have to take. So Gary highlights this famous study. I've heard this study talked about a ton. This was the study that really birthed this 10,000 hours rule. And deliberate practice on something for 10,000 hours made you an expert in that field. And I think this was something that even Malcolm Gladwell talked about in his famous book, Outliers. I think he highlighted this study as well. So Gary brings it up here. And mastery, so the thing, I'll compare mastery to this. It's like stock dividends. You can either invest in the growth stock, which you're banking on buying it low and then selling it at a very high price because it's got a potential to just shoot straight up in price. Or you get the, value stock. If you go the Warren Buffett route, Coca-Cola. He's been invested in Coca-Cola for a long time. And you just buy little bit at a time, dollar cost average. So you buy a little bit every month, every week, or whatever. And Coca-Cola pays a dividend. The growth stock does not. And you just keep hanging on to it. And over time, those dividends get reinvested if you choose to do so. And over time, it adds up. And you have more of the stock. You're earning more dividends. And that's how I picture when Gary says that mastery bears gifts along the way. Along the way to mastering something, you get some dividends back from it. You get little successes that feed the journey to keep going forward. And that's the thing. As I stated earlier, it's constantly learning and relearning. There's a story on, I think, page 176 where a judo black belt asked when he was on his deathbed. Actually, I think it was the founder of judo. It was the founder of judo he talks about. On his deathbed, he asked his students or his loved ones around him to say, "Bury me in my white belt." I take that to mean, hey, I'm going on to this other stage in my life that I don't know about. I don't have any experience in. Other stage in your being, in your existence. You're just, it's not death, it's transitioning into another phase that I'm going to be a white belt in that phase. Bury me in my white belt. I'm a black belt in this phase, in this current state of being, but now I'm a white belt. Because see, even he recognizes he's a lifelong learner, this gentleman that they talk about. Because he realizes, hey, now's the time where the skill sets that got me through this phase are going to not be the same skill sets that get me through the next phase. Next commitment. Moving from E to P. And what does E to P mean? E, entrepreneurial. P, purposeful. Gary asks us this question at the beginning of this section. Are you doing the best you can do? Are you doing it the best it can be done? And this kind of tripped me up. Because I say all the time, like, oh, I'm going to give you my best. I'm going to give you my best. But is it the best that can be done? I think there's a difference between those two things, but they can also be the same. Sometimes the best you do is the best that can be done, but every time you do your best doesn't mean that it's the best that can be done. You see what I'm saying there? So you want to have a purposeful attitude. And I don't think the entrepreneurial attitude is bad either. And Gary states that, everybody starts off as entrepreneurial. You're doing things with energy and enthusiasm. You're waking up every morning and you just want to do everything. You've got energy to put forth towards everything. But the energy is spent in not the most intelligent of ways sometimes. Purposeful is taking the energy and using it in the smartest way possible and realizing that sometimes you're going to have to perform different actions to get different results. See, that's the thing with the entrepreneurial way. Because, see, I always think like entrepreneurial, good, that's a positive thing. But in this way, I think it can be positive. But the real downside here that Gary's talking about is trying to bash your way through doors with all this energy when really you just have to turn the doorknob. Bashing your way through the door, that's the entrepreneurial way. Turning the doorknob and just walking through it, that's the purposeful way. So he even gives another example in this section about, if you got to cut some firewood, the entrepreneurial man will just chop down a bunch of trees, and it might take him a while. So it takes a while to chop down a tree. The purposeful guy will ask for a chainsaw. So you see the difference there. It's basically working smarter, not harder. And that may be oversimplifying it, because I really don't like when people say that, oh, you got to work smarter. I remember Gary Vee talking about this, and I totally agreed with Gary Vee on this. Like, oh, you got to work smarter. You can't work harder. But it's like, dude, you got to put in a lot of work sometimes. It's not a bad thing. It's just sometimes you have to realize that if you keep going at a problem with the same thinking and you're getting the same results, I mean, that's what Einstein said. That's insanity. Eventually, the purposeful mindset is going to have to come in, and you're going to have to try something a little bit different. This is also the section where Gary talks about the OK plateau. And he gives a great example on typing speed. If all you did was just put effort towards something, right? If that's all it took, then your typing speed would just keep increasing and increasing, because I type every day, but my typing speed's been the same. Like, I type pretty quickly, but it doesn't increase. It's not on a linear time scale. It's like a logarithmic time scale. It's just, and not even that. It's just been steady state for years and years now, because it's not deliberate practice. And I'll be honest, I am on the OK plateau with my typing speed. Because I'm not putting forth effort to practice to get it any higher. There's no real need for me to do that, and that's okay. Now, if I wanted to increase it, I would have to put forward deliberate practice, do typing tests. There's stuff online that you've probably seen. You can test your words per minute. So it's not enough to just show up. That is a big part of it. And I've heard people say half of life is just showing up. Yes, 100% you need to show up. But then there's this other part of the battle where deliberate practice has to set in. In the entrepreneurial way here, path, mindset, what have you, everybody needs it. You need this in the start, but you need to realize when you need to pivot to the P. The problem with the E, if all you do is E, you get frustrated when you start to hit ceilings and you can't go past them. I've had this happen to me multiple times. I go through it now. I still go through it today, where I just want to do the same thing, and I can't figure out why I can't break past this plateau. And then I become dejected and I want to quit. When really, I should be moving to the P mindset and asking, well, what are the other options? What are the other ways? Are there any doorknobs that I can just turn and open? Because trying to bash my way through this door, I'm not strong enough. I don't have the right equipment. And it's just not working. And I'm wasting a lot of energy doing it. So you got to know when to pivot from E to P. Next, the last one. Last commitment, living the accountability cycle. So Gary does a comparison between the victim and the accountable. And these two different mindsets, two different cycles, two different ways of looking at the world. One of them very positive, one of them not so positive. You want to be in the accountability cycle. You want to be responsible for your actions and realize that you can change certain things to get what you want out of life. Else you end up in the victim cycle, which is constantly doubting yourself, thinking that things are out of your control. And it's hard to get anywhere because you believe that since things are out of your control, things are going to happen to you regardless of what you do. So the accountable life cycle, these are the certain traits for it. Not being the victim. You're seeking reality. You're acknowledging reality. So there are things that are not fair. There are things that you can't control, but you own those things and you control yourself. So you can't control that the door is a steel door. It's gated. It's super, super tight on lockdown. You can't control any of that. But what you can control is finding the master key to open up that gate and to unlock that door. Whereas like the victim would see that and be super upset, would still try to just bash their way through the door, would blame somebody else for not being able to get through the door, etc., etc., etc. So the accountable person finds a solution. They find a different solution. The thinking that got you to the door is going to be a different type of thinking that's going to get you through that door. To the door, through the door. I think I said that right. So you find the solution. You find the key to open up the gate. And then you just get on with it. Once you understand what you have to do, you just do it. You just do it. I think I've told this story before on this channel about listening to Gary Vaynerchuk all the time. And I had to stop. Even to this day, I respect Gary Vaynerchuk and I really like him. But I had to stop listening to him because after a certain time of listening to these guys, Gary Vaynerchuk, Grant Cardone, Jordan Belfort to a certain extent too. I mean, take your pick of these people, Ty Lopez, all these people. it comes to a certain point where it's like, dude, I get it. Now I just have to put it to practice. It becomes repetitive. And you just got to get on with it. You know what you got to do, and you put things to action. So that's the accountable life cycle. Now, the victim life cycle is basically the opposite of what you see in the left column. So it's avoiding reality. It's fighting reality. It's blaming others. It's coming up with all kinds of excuses. And you never try to find a solution or get on with anything because all you're doing is just waiting and hoping things get solved. Dude, I've definitely had this mindset before. And I think it's important to recognize when you are having this mindset and to shift your way over to the accountable life cycle. So you avoid and you fight reality. By that, and if you look on the left-hand side, it's you seek and acknowledge reality. I think the biggest difference there is knowing that you're going to have to come up with a different solution. You're going to have to find a different path. Whereas the victim path doesn't want to change. That's the reality of a certain situation. You can't just bust your way through the door, but you avoid reality. You keep trying to bust your way through the door. You're fighting the reality. Whereas the accountable person, again, acknowledges, hey, I'm not strong enough. I need to find the key or find somebody who can unlock this door for me. And so yeah, that's the thing. Sometimes it's going to take help. Sometimes it's going to take help. Next, how do we live the accountability life cycle well? Gary talks about finding an accountability partner. And this isn't somebody who's necessarily a cheerleader for you, although they can be a cheerleader for you, but it's somebody who's going to tell you the honest truth when you ask them. And again, not necessarily a cheerleader, but somebody that's going to give you honest feedback, objective feedback, going to tell you when, hey, it's time to pivot, or hey, you are doing a good job in that. Keep it going. So finding that accountability partner is very good. It keeps you accountable, keeps you away from the victim mindset, keeps you on a certain track because you're going to have certain thoughts and you're going to have certain biases that are going to make you think you're doing something right, but then somebody else will have the 30,000 foot view of it because they're looking at you objectively, that they're going to be able to see things you can't necessarily see. It's kind of like when you write a paper and you don't see the mistakes you make in writing the paper, the spelling and the grammar, but then somebody else reads it and they see all the mistakes. Because when you write it and you read it, you're reading it, even though the mistakes are there in the paper, you're reading it as if how you want to see it. But somebody else, again at the 30,000 foot view of it, are reading it for the very first time, and they're reading it as somebody who didn't write it, and they're reading it to find the mistakes in it. You see what I'm saying there? Hopefully I'm describing that in a good way you guys can get. And I need to get back to this. So earlier in the book, we talked about how people who write down their goals they were more likely to succeed at the goals when they wrote them down. But even more likely to succeed were the people who wrote down their goals and sent their goals to their peers. Writing down your goals makes you accountable to you. Sending them to somebody else makes you accountable not only to you, but also to somebody else. And I think that is a very powerful thing. At least for me, I hate to disappoint myself, but I also hate to disappoint other people. It's almost like a reputation kind of thing. I don't like failing at certain things because I feel like I let other people down. So I don't know if that's even like a healthy way to look at it, but I totally get where Gary comes from in this. When you send your goals to other people, okay, if I ever failed at a goal that I placed on myself, well, only I know about it. But now when I send it to somebody else, it's like, oh, now if I fail at it, I know about it and they know about it. Oh, dude, I got a reputation. Oh no. Oh, I got to do everything in my power to make this thing happen. So that goes along with this whole accountability partner idea, and writing down your goals, sending them to somebody else, having them kind of check you on it, keep you on track, be a cheerleader when it's warranted, but also laying out the honest truth when that's warranted too, and let you know when you're getting off track. So to sum it up, we've got the big ideas. Commit to be your best. And being purposeful about your one thing. This is all about, being accountable and the accountable life cycle. Take ownership of your outcomes. Again, accountability. Find a coach. Accountability coach. All of these big ideas, the summaries, and these big ideas, again, are just the summaries at the end of the chapter. This really all has to do with the accountability life cycle. Pretty much. I mean, the commit to your best, that also kind of has to do with the mastery. And I guess purposeful has the word purposeful in it, so that has to do with moving from E to P. The second commitment that we talked about. Okay, so I guess these are all the commitments here are represented, but you could kind of see where I'm coming from, I guess, that the third commitment is present in the first 3 bullet points there. But okay, let's break this down. Commit to be your best. Mastery. It's a path, not a destination. Be purposeful about your one thing. Moving from E to P. Entrepreneurial is great. You need the energy, but sometimes, a lot of times, most of the time, you're going to need to convert some of that energy into purposeful actions. Different types of actions to get you around certain problems. Can't just bash your way through the door. You got to find a key sometimes. 3, accountability. Live the accountability life cycle, not the victim life cycle. Find a coach to go along with the accountability. Get yourself somebody who's not just going to be a cheerleader for you, but is going to hold you accountable and is going to give you honest feedback. Those are the 3 commitments. What did the 3 commitments remind you guys about? Rereading this chapter reminded me not only of the one thing, but it reminded me of the 4 agreements, the 3 commitments, the 4 agreements, the 4 commitments that you make to yourself. Hey, we got a playlist on that. Check that out, by book by Don Miguel Ruiz. And that's going to do it for this chapter, guys. Thank you very much. We've only got a couple more. I'll only be doing a couple more videos on the one thing, and we're going to be wrapping this up shortly. Next chapter, chapter 17, we're going to be talking about the 4 thieves of productivity. So the 3 commitments you make to achieve your one thing, well, now the 4 thieves that steal away time from your one thing and how to combat them. Or I'm guessing that's what Gary's going to talk about, how to combat them or how to recognize when they are happening. Guys, thank you very much for listening this far. And tune in next week. Big things coming. Over 300 subscribers now. I don't know if I mentioned that. Over 300 on YouTube. Thank you guys so much. Really, really appreciate it. And stick with me. Big things coming up in the future. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care.